So, what's with the paired passage on the ACT's reading section, and how do you possibly answer it? Right? That's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's video. My name's Kristina Simos of Ivy Lunch Test Prep, and for the past 15 years, I have been helping high schoolers all around the globe drastically raise their SAT and ACT test scores and ultimately land spots at their dream colleges. So, let's get started. So, the first thing I want to talk about is why do we care so much about figuring out the most efficient way of accurately answering the paired or the double passage on the ACT's reading section? And I will tell you why. The reason is because this one strategy alone, depending on where you're starting from, it might be the only thing you need to master to get the reading score that you want and then ultimately the ACT score that you want. Okay. So here's the deal. If you only need to improve 2 to 5 points in the reading of the ACT in order to get the ultimate score that you want, it very well could be that this strategy that I'm about to tell you today, and this strategy only, might be enough for you to actually get those points, okay? That's why this is so important. Let's say you need many more points than 2 to 5 points. It could be that in that case, you need many strategies. In fact, you might need to overhaul the entire way you go about reading a passage on the ACT in order to even do that. However, if you only need a handful of points, this one strategy might be enough. So that's why it's so exciting to me to share this with you. So now, what is the basic format of the ACT's reading section? So if you are taking the current paper and pencil version of the test, then for you, if you're a regular time test taker, you get 35 minutes to complete 40 questions in the ACT's reading section. Okay. If you are already onto the online ACT, or you're watching this and you're about to do the paper and pencil or online version of the ACT starting September of 2025 or later, then it would be slightly different for you. It'd be 36 questions in 40 minutes. But here's the thing, that's kind of like tomato. The basic structure of the reading, either the current version or the new version, it's mostly the same. Okay. So here's how it breaks down. For all of the reading sections, you're going to have 4 passages, right? It's always going to be literary fiction and then 3 nonfictions, okay? And then the nonfictions are going to be social science, humanities, and natural science. And they're always that 4 in that order, okay? Now, the timing will differ slightly depending on which version of the test you're taking. If you're doing the current or the old version and you're a regular time test taker, then you basically have 8 minutes, 45 seconds to finish one passage and answer its accompanying 10 questions. Okay. If you're doing the updated or the new version of the ACT, then it's slightly better time-wise for you. For you, each passage is going to be 9 questions and you get 10 minutes to do each passage in. So one fewer question, slightly more time. Okay. Still not the most time ever, but you get more time. Now, here's the thing. This double passage or this paired passage business of which I'm talking about, it could be any one of these 4 passages. Maybe it's the fiction, maybe it's the humanities, maybe it's the natural science, maybe it's the social science. You won't know, okay? It'll be different on any test. So before we go into exactly what the paired passage looks like and then how to approach it so you save time and rack up as many points as possible, I have a question for you. And that is, have you ever encountered the double or the paired passage on the ACT's reading section? And if so, do you have problems with it or are you fine with it? Let me know in the comments. Just comment. And I really want to hear what you have to say. And while you're at it, just go ahead and like this video and subscribe to my channel. And then that way, every week when I post the latest on the ACT, the SAT, and college application essays, you'll be the first to know. So now let's talk about how the double passage of the ACT's reading section is structured and what it even looks like, okay? So instead of a single passage that takes up 2 full columns of a page, which the other 3 are single passages, the double passage will basically have the same amount of words. It's literally just organized differently, okay? So you'll have 2 passages, but they're each half the length. You'll have passage A, and then you'll have passage B, okay? Then Depending on the test that you might have before you. Sometimes the ACT is very nice and generous with labeling questions for you, and sometimes they're not. So let me share my screen and show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so this right here is a sample double passage from a past ACT. And as you can see, it's a natural science passage. That would mean that it's the fourth passage in the reading section of this particular test. And you have passage A, and it almost makes it a full column. And then you have passage B. And then you get another almost full column. But then the way this one is structured, they're very nice. They actually give you like these little boxes, and they tell you that questions 31 to 34 ask about passage A alone. And then they point out, like they give you another box over here, and it's questions 35 to 37 ask about passage B. That's so helpful. That's so generous of them. And then finally, you get this nice little box over here, and it says questions 38 through 40 ask about both passages. Now, that's one way things might show up. The ACT also can give you a double passage where they don't tell you which questions are about which passage. Let me show you an example of that. Okay, so here we have another sample of a double passage. This one happens to be the fiction, so it was the first passage of this reading section. And if you notice, we have passage A over here, taking up basically a whole column. We have passage B over here, taking up basically a whole column. And then notice, no boxes. They just go into the questions, right? So they're not telling you what's about passage A. They're not telling you what's passage B only, and they're not telling you about both. Okay, so this is just to show you the two options that you might get, and don't be taken aback if you get the second one as opposed to the one where they nicely label it. I'm going to show you how to do this, okay? But before I tell you how to go about it, I first want to walk you through how most students do this before they come to me, and it's the wrong way, and it will eat up your time and make you miss a lot of questions. So I want to point this out. No shame if this is what you're currently doing, but I want to point it out so we can correct it. So let's talk the wrong way to approach double passages. So what a lot of students that come to me will do before I straighten it out with them, okay? They will start reading and they'll read passage A, and then they'll keep reading and they'll read passage B, and then they'll get to that first question, and well, the first question's about passage A alone, is it not? But what was the last thing that they just read? Didn't they just read passage B? Like they read everything first? Okay, here's the problem with that. You did read passage A, but now you forgot about it because then you immediately went to passage B. Your brain has probably jumbled up both of these passages in your head and made kind of like a Franken passage in your mind, okay? This is not a good place to be because now you can't really keep the details straight. You can't really keep the different perspectives of the two passages or the different opinions straight. And now you're going to go in and answer questions about passage A. You've forgotten about passage A. So what's going to happen? Now you're going to go back. You're probably going to reread passage A, and you're probably more confused. You've definitely wasted a couple minutes of reading, and you're probably going to get more questions wrong. Okay. And so then you're like, okay, cool. I answered questions about passage A, and then they start asking you about passage B things, and you're like, oh, I don't remember that anymore. So now you're rereading all these things about passage B, and then they get to the ones about both, and now you're just a hot mess because honestly, these two passages in your brain have done this, and it's a disaster. Okay, so that is how not to do a paired or a double passage on the ACT's reading section. Now I'm going to tell you how you should go about this question type and this passage type. So this is the best ACT paired passage strategy, and it's only 6 steps. So what you are going to do, the very first thing, you are going to read the blurb. What do I mean by the blurb? You know that thing at the top that said literary fiction, and it says such and such was written by this person in this year, and it's an excerpt from such and such book or whatever it is. You're going to read that. It is just going to help you. You always read that, regardless of if it's a single passage or a paired passage. Got it? So first step, read the blurb. Now the second step, you are going to read passage A. Literally, like that first column. And so you're going to read it in its entirety. And if you have any specific reading strategies to do that, great. If you do some of my reading strategies that I talk about in my Ultimate ACT Reading Guide online course, great. If you don't know what I'm talking about by a specific reading strategy, that's okay. Just read passage A in its entirety. That is step 2. Now let's go to step 3. You are not going to continue reading. Now you are going to start answering the questions from the beginning. Now, why? Because if they labeled them for you, you know that the passage A questions, the ones that are about passage A and only about passage A, are the very first block of questions. Maybe there's 2 of them, maybe there's 4 of them. Who knows? Even if your test does not label them for you and you don't get that cool little box telling you which passage the questions are about, you know that the first questions are still about passage A. So in that case, you will answer them basically in order until you all of a sudden get to one where you're like, oh, that wasn't about what I read. That must be about passage B. Okay. So at that point, after answering all passage A only questions, so you're starting at the top of the questions and you're going until it's not talking about that passage anymore, then you may now proceed to step 4. Now, what do you think you're going to do for step 4? If you said read passage B, you, my friend, would be correct. Okay, so 4th step is now we are going to read passage B in its entirety. And again, if you have a specific reading strategy that you use, go ahead and do it. It's just for a much shorter passage. And now we go to step 5. For step 5, you are going to continue answering questions where you left off. And guess what that means? That means you are going to be answering passage B only questions. Now, maybe you get a nice little box that says, oh, questions 25 through 27 are about passage B. Maybe you don't. So if you don't, that's okay. You already answered the first ones up until it was no longer about passage A. That means the very next question should be about passage B. So you are going to answer all the questions that have to do with passage B by itself. So that is step 5. And then finally, we have the last step, which is step 6, and that is answer the remaining questions, which are the questions about both. Okay. Now, this is why this works, because when you read one passage and then you don't distract yourself or your short-term memory by reading the other, and then you just go and you answer the questions having to do with that passage, the beauty is the questions on the ACT help you understand the passage. When you work through those questions, it actually makes you understand what you just read way more than reading by itself. So when you read passage A, answer the questions having to do with passage A, now you will know passage A the best you will ever know it, right? You now understand what this author is talking about, what their perspective is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then you go to passage B. And now you answer the questions that have to do with only passage B. Now you're going to really understand passage B. And most importantly, this is going to keep those 2 passages, those 2 perspectives, those 2 opinions separate and distinct in your head. So that now when you answer the questions about both, which are the ones at the end, you will know what each person was talking about and who disagreed with what and what they agreed upon. Okay. So this is the most efficient possible way you can go through this. This saves you from reading and rereading. It saves you from getting confused and blurring all the boundaries of the 2 passages together. And you will save so many minutes. You will get so many more questions right. I am so excited for you to try this. So again, if you only have a few points that you need to improve on the ACT's reading section, this strategy, if you learn it and you actually practice it and you get really good at it, this might be the only thing you need to do to reach your ultimate reading score, right? That's kind of amazing. If, on the other hand, you have some more work you need to do and you need a lot more strategies and content like the ones I just shared today, then you have some options. So one thing you can do is you could work with me one-on-one. You could find out in the show notes all about my process and how to work with me one-on-one in a package or just with regular tutoring sessions. Or if that's not in the cards, I have plenty of ebooks and courses for all sections of the SAT and ACT. And specifically, I have the Ultimate ACT Reading Guide, which is a self-study video course that teaches you all the reading strategies, all the question types that you need to know to ace the ACT's reading section. So check it out in the link below.